brought to you by Charity Mobile, the phone company that supports life and family. 5% of your monthly plan price goes to your favorite charity. Buy the way you believe at CharityMobile.com and use promo code TRADITION.
We ask ourselves all the time, both you and I, watching this, and myself, where are the better bishops? Where are the cardinals? Most of the ones that we talk about here, they write nice letters, telling people to keep the faith and do all the good things that they should do. Sometimes they will go to a conference or an ordination or something and teach people about the faith and make slights against the things going on in the church, the errors coming out. They'll almost never name names anymore, and most of them have grown silent in the face of this increasing crisis in the church. This has been done, and especially in the aftermath of the canceling of Bishop Strickland and Cardinal Burke having his apartment attempted to be taken from him in Rome. They've grown afraid because Francis is now using raw power against them to get them to stop talking. All the while, the Synod on Synodality just wrapped up in Rome, and we saw open heresy, open rejection of the faith, people proclaiming that they can change the faith. And Francis tolerates it, encourages it even. After all, synodality is all about dialogue and talking and discussion and no judgment. Never that. Unless, of course, you want the same faith of our ancestors. Then you get pushback. Where are the bishops? The number of heresies that Francis has spoken and even tried to hide in some of his writings are so numerous that you could write a book documenting all of them. The bishops know this. The better cardinals know this. And all of this feeds into the alternative hypothesis that Francis has never been pope in the first place, that Benedict XVI's resignation was invalid for one reason or another. And there are a number of competing hypotheses on them. I don't denigrate any of them. It's not something I find all that useful, and I'll explain why here in a moment. But the basic question is now being raised by other people, and this is an article came across my desk over the weekend, and I thought you should see this because there's now an accusation, and we're going to give voice to it. Are the better cardinals, especially the cardinals, those who participated in the conclave that inflicted Francis on the church, are they guilty of a dereliction of duty for not addressing these concerns by just dismissing them or pretending that his heresies aren't heresies, that there are not legitimate questions about his legitimacy? Are they guilty of a dereliction of duty? Have they failed to defend the body of Christ, the mystical body of Christ, from an enemy within? It's a serious accusation. Let's go over the article. This comes from the Catholic Monitor with this headline: Are Cardinal Burke and other cardinals who do not act putting their immortal souls in danger because they are denying the Petrine office of Pope John Paul II, who made binding law for the 2013 conclave in the University Dominici Gregis? This is an interesting argument by an author who is at the very least sympathetic to Anne Barnhart, Patrick Coffin, and a few others. Arguments are, again, varieties of these arguments out there, and I'm not litigating any of them. That's not the point of this. But there are general argument is that Francis isn't a legitimate pope because Benedict didn't actually resign the papacy. That for whatever reason, one reason or another, again, many different variations of this, that his resignation was not valid. That is the general argument here, and the author here does seem at least sympathetic to that argument. And all the people I just named, they make a better case for their position than I ever could. So I'm not, again, trying to denigrate their position here. I'm just not interested in the argument one way or another because I don't have a high opinion of any of the post-conciliar popes, given that every single one of them presided over a not-so-quiet apostasy from the faith that was happening on a massive scale in the Western world. And they were all innovators to some degree, and all laid the groundwork for Pope Francis to do what he has been doing to the Church. That is undeniable, even if people don't like to hear it. But the argument the author of this piece is making here is an interesting one because of the basic accusation that the cardinals who we all look to for leadership in these times of apostasy are guilty of a dereliction of duty I've said the same thing basically because they all write good letters that I'm quite happy to bring to you, but they keep it to letters and public speaking engagement with safe audiences. They don't take real action. They don't act. And at some point, it is fair to ask if they are guilty of failing to do their duty to protect the souls of the faithful, being led astray by the Pied Piper wearing white in Rome. The author here presents quotes from canon lawyers, very mainstream traditional Catholics, again, very mainstream ones, as well as Bishop Gracida, who many of you are familiar with the work of, to make the case that Jorge Mario Bergoglio has never been Pope to begin with. A position that many of you are very sympathetic to. And if you find this to be an interesting topic, I encourage you to read the full article for yourself at the Catholic Monitor, which I'll make sure to post a link to in today's show notes at returntotradition.org. That way you can read it for yourself. I'm not going to quote the whole thing here. But here we go. From the article, quote, "In what way do Catholics who complain about Francis not solve the problem of Francis? Bishop René Gracida put it best." Quoting the bishop, "One can say that Francis the Merciful is a heretic until one passes away, but it changes nothing. What is needed is action. We must pressure the cardinals to act. Francis is not orthodox, so there are only two things he could be. One, a validly elevated pope who is a material heretic until cardinals correct him, and then canonically proclaim he is a formal heretic if he doesn't recant, thus deposing him. Or, two, an invalidly selected anti-pope who is a heretic. The point is whether you think using all the information available, one, is the objective truth, or two, is the objective truth you must act. You must, as Bishop Gracida says, put, quote, pressure on the cardinals and bishops to act whatever you think." Strangely enough, a member of the Francis Trads, whatever that is, back in 2016 also called on traditionalists to act, and of all places in 1 Peter 5, which is a card-holding member of Trad Incorporated. It was 5 years ago when I used to love to read 1 Peter 5's comment section when this happened. Here's a fun flashback when Steve Skojic actually defended Anne Barnhart from Chris Ferrara, and Ferrara called for an imperfect council. Quote, Chris Ferrara, "To declare that Francis is not the Pope makes for good clickbait." Steve Skojic replies, "Anne writes things that certainly come across as sensationalist. This is who she is. I don't believe she ever publishes something she doesn't truly believe in. I don't think it's fair to call this clickbait." To which Chris Ferrara replies, "My only objection is any of us making final forensic determinations based on, quote, overwhelming evidence and then announcing our verdict of one. It's a rather silly exercise. Perhaps a better approach is to amass the evidence and send it to every cardinal, demanding they convene an imperfect council and issue the kind of judgment Bellarmine contemplated in this situation. Not that the Pope is deposed, but that he is deposed himself. Such a hypothetical conclave would offer the Pope an opportunity to explain himself. Moreover, Ferrara explained in 2018 about the need for an imperfect council. What were the grounds for a declaration of deposition at such a gathering of prelates? One could readily point to the evidence that a faction that includes Bergoglio himself had agreed upon his elevation before the conclave, and that all those involved, including Bergoglio, were thereby excommunicated latae sententia in accordance with Article 81 of John Paul II's Universi Dominici Gregis, which provides, quote, the cardinal elector shall further abstain from any form of pact, agreement, promise, or other comment of any kind which could oblige them to give or deny their vote to a person or persons. If this were in fact done, even under oath, I decree that such a commitment shall be null and void, and that no one shall be bound to observe it, and I hereby impose the penalty of excommunication latae sententia upon those who violate this prohibition. End quote. To that last point, we have had cardinals, and Francis himself, admit that there was deal-making going on that at least looks like it violates the letter of that law. Whether or not it does or not is something for the cardinals to decide, and they've never been willing to approach the question. But Pope Francis himself has said that he was made pope by certain interests at the conclave to promote certain things that we've seen him doing since then. That by itself sounds like it would invalidate his elevation. Again, keyword is sounds like, because as Catholics, we are in a hierarchical church. We look to cardinals and to bishops who we are supposed to be in union with to act. And most of them are sitting on their hands right now. That's the point of this. And interestingly enough, you see mainstream Catholic voices, we'll say on the sort of the traditionalist and resistance side of things, from the last decade saying the same thing. After all, you just heard Chris Ferrara. The man's a lawyer. He is a lawyer of such high regard that he has argued before the U.S. Supreme Court before, okay? He is a man who will, without question, understand canon law when he sees it. He will understand papal encyclicals and the rest of these things when he reads them, more so than most anybody you probably spend time listening to in podcasts. He's not a lightweight on these things. His words should be taken very seriously. But most voices have moved on from this subject. Why is that? Partially because there's a certain stigma attached to even covering this topic. It puts you in a corner. It just does. Even entertaining these things. Even when I say I have doubts about the validity of Bergoglio, but I'm waiting for the bishops to act because that's their job, not mine, that puts me in a corner. I just admit it, and I'm willing to say it. A lot are not willing to do that. And I wonder why that is. We ask the bishops to act. Now, the author outlines something that the greatest teachers of the faith say about this here, on how this would basically work. So back to his article, quote, to quote Cajetan on this point, citations taken from the linked article by Robert Sisko, deposition by an imperfect council is appropriate when, quote, one or more popes suffer uncertainty with regard to their elevation, as seems to have arisen in the schism of Urban VI and others. Then, lest the church be perplexed, those members of the church who are available have the power to judge which is the true pope. If it can be known, and if it cannot be known, it has the power to provide that the cardinals agree on one or another of them. I, the author, am not saying that such a case has been proven. Rather, what I am saying is that this hypothetical imperfect council could determine that it has been proven and act accordingly, and that the church would judge any resulting deposition of Bergoglio in the same manner it judges the deposition of Benedict XVI, or Benedict IX, rather, end quote. And here's another position on this. This is where my position on this is. Burke and the rest need to convene an imperfect council to put to rest one way or the other the question of Benedict's resignation. They need to take the question deadly seriously, engage with the evidence seriously as if their souls and their eternal salvation are at stake when they do it, and bring an honest answer to the church. That's what they need to do. They also need to stop ignoring Francis's errors because he can cut off their funds, cancel them the way he did Bishop Strickland, or whatever other sanction can be imposed on them by Francis. It is, in fact, their duty to act. But they probably won't. And you know why they won't? They're waiting him out. That's pretty obvious at this point. They're waiting out a man who could be with us for another 5 years, another 10 years. Obviously, that's what they're doing. Meanwhile, Francis continues to remake the Catholic Church and the College of Cardinals into the Synodal Church. And most of those cardinals he's chosen were, to paraphrase the man himself, more open-minded on issues related to the James Martin sin. As people dig into who the men are who are going to become cardinals are in the coming conclave in December, the more you look at them, the more it becomes very obvious that these are all sympathetic men to James Martin. Virtually all of them. Begs a lot of questions about Francis himself when he does things like that, but that's where we are now. And for whatever reason, the cardinals continue to remain silent, as if the next pope will be any better. The best case scenario for the next papal conclave is that you get a moderate, and many people, I think that could be actually the worst outcome. And I say that because while this man will not preach heresy, probably, at least overtly, maybe flirt with it the way most of the post-conciliar popes have to some degree, but he will almost certainly do nothing about the things Francis has done, or maybe some minor tinkering around the edges to placate the voices out there, to quiet us, and then many people will tune out. And then they'll start to wonder, why is James Martin still going around there saying the things he does without reprisal? Why is it that these bad bishops are crushing the traditionalists everywhere? Why is it that things haven't improved much? It's because a moderate pope will, by definition, not do anything. That's where we are. The better bishops need to stop waiting him out and start acting before it's too late. Hot take from me, I guess. I'm curious what you have to say, though, because your voice to me is more important than mine. So let me know in the comments. Do you think that it's a fair thing for the Cardinals to take the questions seriously, not just dismiss them as, fringe ravings or whatever? Take the evidence seriously, take the argument seriously, make a ruling as if their souls depended on it, and then proceed from there. Wherever the facts may take them, wherever their prayers, united to their works, may take them. Let me know what you think of this in the comments, please. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't, it does help. So does sharing this on social media, that helps too. And, as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.